Yeah, okay. So I won't talk about hydrogen or electric solution, but about gas solution, an old solution, but which is cheap and as green as electric. So this is the topic of my presentation today. Just a few words about GRDF. GRDF is the gas grid, main gas grid operator in France. We are operate the largest and the longest natural gas network in Europe, and we make the link between the production of biogas, the biogas production plants, and the compressed natural gas station. So a few words I will start with talking about the recent study which shows the benefits of biomethane as a fuel, and I will give some example of how it's applied in France, in Paris and Grenoble, and give you some info about the economic cost of this solution. So, first of all, how can biomethane be as clean as electric? When we talk about zero emission solution, we often talk only about what's out of the exhaust. This is what's in blue on my scheme here. The fuel at the tailpipe, but when we consider the whole greenhouse gas emission, we have to think also about the fuel supply. How is the hydrogen, electricity, or gas, how is it produced? Is it green or not? Specifically when we talk about electric vehicles, we have to take also into account the life cycle of the vehicle itself. I'm thinking about the battery mainly, the production and the end of life. So when we add all these different components and when we study the whole life cycle, we can make a real comparison between all different energies. So this is what you see on the screen. It's a recent study from the French Institute of Petroleum, which compared greenhouse gas emission from diesel, gasoline, natural gas, electric vehicle, and biomethane. And you can see that electric vehicle and biomethane have the same range of greenhouse gas emissions. So basically, biomethane can be as green as electric by being used in a car. Why is it green? Because of the waste-to-wheel cycle. Basically, all the emissions from the exhaust of the vehicles, the CO2 emitted by the vehicle, is compensated by all the CO2 captured by the organic material used to produce biomethane. So this is the big arrow on the screen where emission at the tailpipe is compensated by the carbon capture of the plants. It's not 100% zero emission because as any production of energy, as any process, it emits some carbon. But on a global analysis, bio-CNG vehicles emit 85% less CO2 than a diesel vehicle. So we can be as clean, as I said, as electric with this production of biomethane with organic waste. That is for the carbon part. When we look at exhaust emission or when we look at the air quality issues, you recently heard about maybe studies that compared diesel and gas emission from trucks. I'd like to focus on this study, which is a French study, a very large one, where 12 trucks were equipped, were monitored, the emission, CO2, NOx emission were monitored with sensor during 2 years, and they run for 1 million kilometers over 2 years. And in different conditions, this project make a comparison of NOx emission between the most recent diesel trucks and natural gas trucks. And as you can see, natural gas cut in half NOx emission compared to diesel, and that without using any complex depollution system, which is important because, as you all know, the standards for emission in Europe are going to be tougher in the next year, and natural gas trucks and biomethane trucks are ready for these new standards, for Euro 7 standards, because we have some room for improvement. So that's an important thing to remind. This is a kind of low-tech solution ready for improvement. Another thing I like to focus on is the cost of all solution. When you talk about alternative energy, hydrogen, electric, we often forget to speak about the cost. And if we want a massive deployment, a massive development of this alternative solution, it has to be as cheap as today's solution. As well, this is important to remember you, to remind you the components of the cost for the consumer. We talked about the initial cost, we talked about the resale value of the trucks at the end of life, the fuel costs and the maintenance costs. All these different costs are part of what we call the total cost of ownership. And one of the big advantage of CNG and bio-CNG as fuel is that for trucks running enough, it's as cheap as diesel, at least in France. For trucks, you need to run 70,000 kilometers per year to be as cheap as diesel. It's cheap for user, but it's also cheap for the citizen, for the taxpayer. It's also important because we can't have a massive deployment of alternative fuel if it's too expensive for public funds. So just a reminder of what is the cost today in France. There is no subsidy in France for buying a CNG or gas vehicles. There are only tax reduction, a 40% bonus depreciation on trucks, and a lower tax on the fuel, which is the main component. So a cheap solution compared to other, and that's why in France it's developing a lot, mainly on heavy duty. Why on heavy duty? Because of the egg and chicken problem. You heard about that with hydrogen as well. There is no station today, so no vehicles. We had the same problem in France. If you look at this graph, which are the registration of new gas vehicles in France, you can see we tried in between 2006 and 2009, we tried to develop the natural gas cars. It was a huge failure because we didn't have enough stations. This problem is less important with trucks or buses, because for buses, all fleets are coming back to the same place every night, so we can set up some station at this depot. And for trucks, we estimate that with between 200 and 300 flight stations in France is enough to address this market. So today we have 20,000 natural gas vehicles in France. Just two figures to remind you that it's developing a lot. The first one is that 12% of city buses in France are running on natural gas, and 10% of garbage trucks are running on natural gas. I was talking about infrastructure just before. Today we have 150 public stations, gas public stations, and by the end of 2020, 250. So a lot of them are under construction. And these are only the public stations. You have also kind of had the private station for captive fleets, as I say, garbage trucks and buses. So CNG is one thing, but it's nothing without bio-CNG. So let's have a look at how biomethane is developing in France. One important figure is the share of biogas, of biomethane, into the CNG, 12% last year, and it will be about 17% at the end of 2019. So biomethane is a reality today. We are not talking about the tree hiding the forest. It's really growing fast today. Today we have 100 biomethane production plants in operation, and we have 900 projects. So we'll reach the target of the government, which was to have 8 terawatt-hours of biomethane production in France and to reach a 20% biomethane share in CNG. So this was to give you some figures about the development of natural gas and biomethane as a fuel in France. So how was it possible to develop this new mobility, and what are the lessons to be learned and maybe to transpose to other markets like hydrogen? It's mainly due to the engagement of cities. To create a mobility, gas mobility ecosystem, all different cities adopted a common methodology. So the first thing they did is to promote the gas by leading by example. So they bought CNG buses, they bought CNG garbage trucks. So that was the first step, lead by example. The second thing was supporting the creation of new stations. We can't have vehicle without station, so this was the second step of the methodology. The third one was giving benefits to gas vehicles or to all clean vehicles. And the last one is, when necessary, to give some subsidy for the purchase of some of the first vehicles. So let's focus on two different examples. The first one is Paris. At the end of the year, all the garbage trucks in Paris, the 500 garbage trucks, will be running on natural gas, and half of them will run with 100% biomethane. Regarding buses, today we only have 250 buses fueled by biomethane, but by 2025 we expect 1,600 biomethane buses. All the other will be electrics, but the city wants all the city buses to be clean. And their strategy is to use electric buses for the city center and biomethane buses for all the suburbs. So that was the first thing, leading by example. The second step is creating station. In Paris, this is the intercommunal syndicate for energy, the energy organization, which invested in CNG station. They were supported by EU for the creation of 8 stations. And they plan to have 10 CNG stations by 2022, all in the Paris area. The specificity in Paris is that it's very hard to find available land to develop new stations. So the Paris Urban Planning Agency evaluated the capacity, the capability of the CNG equipment on existing public stations. And what they found is that half of existing fuel stations can receive CNG station. They have enough land to receive the CNG equipment. Third thing is to give some benefits to help people to give them some benefits to help them to buy new vehicles. So in Paris it's quite easy because all diesel vehicles will be banned in 2024. And today, as for today, professional running on CNG or electric vehicles can have free parking if you have tried to park in Paris. This is a big advantage. And last but not least, some of small businesses can receive some subsidy for the purchase of clean vehicle, electric vehicle, H2 or CNG ones. That was Paris example, an easy one because it's a huge city with a lot of funds to set up this kind of policy. But some smaller cities like Grenoble in the Alpes regions set up the same kind of methodology to create a G-mobility ecosystem. Same thing, first step, they lead by example. They bought garbage truck running on CNG, 8 today and 32 by 2032. Half of the city buses run with biomethane, and this biomethane is produced locally with a local wastewater treatment plant. So that's for the municipal fleets. They also created 4 CNG stations, and the investment was done by the gas grid operator, which is not GRDF, by the way. Third step, they gave some advantage to gas trucks. So as in Paris, all diesel vehicles will be banned in 2025, but only for commercial vehicles, so trucks and vans. And last thing, they also gave some subsidies for small businesses which want to purchase clean vehicles. So same methodology both in Paris and in Grenoble to help to create a gas ecosystem, a green mobility ecosystem. So it can apply to gas, and maybe tomorrow could apply to hydrogen with the same kind of methodology. That's all for me.